You know, everyone's always going on and on about how X faction could win 40k, or X faction will win 40k for those of us who are more confident and or deluded. No one wants to be on the losing side after all, and I'm plenty guilty of it. I have enough copium in my blood to resurrect the Eldar gods when it comes to how I view the Craftworlders' chances in this setting. Even if they're probably not in the running for victory, and that sentence is poison coming out of my mouth, most people would probably go with the Tyranids, Chaos, or Orks getting the gold medal at the end of time. But recently, a rather interesting idea was brought up to me. What if no one can win? What if at the end of the day, everyone in the setting is doomed to failure no matter what? And despite having done this kind of thing for over 3 years now, that idea just hadn't occurred to me. I've always thought someone would have to win, preferably the guys with pointy ears, but probably not. But thinking about it, the idea is completely valid. Ignoring meta context, there's plenty of reasons you could argue that mean none of the factions could ever truly win, even if they conquered everyone else in the setting. So with some help from someone else I corrupted into the hobby of selling your organs for plastic crack, here's a rather interesting video. I already want the Imperium of Man to falter and die like the rotting corpse it forgets it is, but perhaps everyone else is doomed to meet the same fate. Outright death for everyone involved? Maybe not. But the factions as they exist and their goals? Well, that's a different story. But before I begin, are you perhaps interested in something like tanks? If so, look no further than Warthunder, the sponsor of this video. Warthunder is the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made, free on PC, consoles, and mobile devices, and with over 2,500 vehicles to choose from. With 10 major nations and anything from 1920s biplanes to modern battle tanks to choose from, there's something to suit your tastes. All of which are incredibly detailed and modeled, with realistic graphics and authentic sounds to make sure you're in an accurate vehicle of war. It's quite nice how there's no hit points, but instead intricately modeled parts that each take damage during the fight. It really makes you appreciate when you get an X-ray damage view of why exactly the crew of that tank you sent to Kingdom Come are getting the closed casket funeral when they're brought home. And I gotta say, being able to play it without $5,000 worth of flight simulator equipment is a hell of an achievement. You can if you want to, because simulator mode is there if you want to feel like you're truly immersed in the fires of war, but a mouse and keyboard, controller, or of course your phone screen are all perfectly fine ways to play as well. And with over 95 million players worldwide, you can bet your ass you'll be facing off against all those vehicles and all those playstyles in a new way every match. To get Warthunder for free on PC, consoles, and mobile, look no further than the links in the pinned comment and description below. For a limited time, you can get yourself the bonus pack if you're a new player or haven't logged on in 6 months, including premium vehicles, an exclusive vehicle decorator Eagle of Valor, 100,000 Silver Lions, and 7 days worth of premium account. Bonus only available for PC and consoles. Thank you to Warthunder for sponsoring. Now then, let's see just why everyone is royally screwed. Let's start with the Imperium. Usually giving GW's favorite child its equal attention cake makes me want to vomit, but because I'm talking about how they're royally screwed, I don't mind starting with them. Now I ask you kindly, for the sake of this video, to put aside as much as you can the fact that obviously for meta reasons, none of this will ever happen. If all the factions in the war game lost, we would no longer have a war game. Same for them winning, for that matter. And of course I will do my best to avoid just bringing up the heat death of the universe killing everyone off, although some factions make this especially difficult. Thank you Necrons and Chaos and your inability to just fade away. Anyways, Imperium. On a scale of 1 to 10 on how screwed they are, I'm giving them a solid 20. This is nothing new, we all know it has nothing but problems, but for the fun and sake of this video, how about I just really let you know how royally screwed the Imperium is, because Doom doesn't even begin to cover it. How about we just start with the outside threats, because unlike some of the other factions, the Imperium has to fight everyone. Every single faction for the Imperium's quote-unquote win condition needs to be wiped off the map, and some of them are for admittedly necessary reasons. Coexisting with the Tyranids, you know, I just don't see that one working out. Others, however, need to be wiped out because the Imperium of Man is perhaps slightly intolerant of people who don't fall under the category of human. Sorry, Tau, I understand that the worst you want to do is conquer some worlds instead of eating the entire galaxy, but you are blue and therefore need to go. So the Imperium's task of ultimately winning is completely exterminating everyone, which is a monumental job to get done. The Tau are the best way to exemplify this. The Imperium could wipe them out no problem, but the issue is that would leave them open to everyone else. I know people bring that fact up a lot to dunk on the Tau, but consider what that means for the Imperium. If focusing on just the Tau, who are easily the smallest faction in the game, would weaken them enough that other factions could take them out or at least do severe damage, how in the hell are they supposed to wipe out someone like the Orks? It's just not happening, simple as. Prior to the Great Rift and the Indomitus Crusade, the whole thing was about how the Imperium was in the time of ending. It was drowning under the weight of everything around it. More and more Orc empires were cropping up, invading everyone. Abaddon, the not as cool as Archaon, was getting the 13th Black Crusade ready. The Tyranids were coming in force. Even if a certain faction might not seem like it was about to take down the Imperium, their actions were signs that things were about to get worse than ever before. The Eldar and the Phoenix Lords were mentioned as being more active than ever before, which I'll come back to, you better believe it, because they believe the Ranadandra was fast approaching. The Ranadandra, for reference, is the final battle against Chaos, where all the Eldar and Slaanesh in particular will throw down for the last time. Even though that doesn't strictly speaking mention the Imperium, you better believe it's going to get caught in the crossfire of something that colossal. Put simply, it just can't fight off all the threats at once. The Imperium is on the defense, constantly fighting off everything trying to do it in. It can't put out any of the fires burning it down, it just has to turn a big fire into a small fire so it can go deal with another big fire. But speaking of the time of ending, which to remind you was named so because Imperial scholars genuinely felt that the Imperium was about to collapse, the problems in it weren't just outside of context problems. Even if the Imperium existed in a vacuum and it was completely alone in the galaxy after conquering everyone, it'd still be royally screwed. The amount of planets rebelling from the Imperium gets higher and higher as the years go on. The Imperium is a busy nation after all, and it outright forgets it has certain planets. One of them can rebel without the greater Imperium knowing about it for hundreds of years, and that's one less planet of support to deal with all the issues it's facing. Space Marine chapters can and have rebelled, becoming renegades or outright traitors that join Chaos. Some of them, like Macragge, are basically their own empire. Sure, they're technically within the Imperium's borders and loyal, but Ultramar and the Ultramarines are functionally their own polity. They give some tithes every now and then before proceeding to do entirely their own thing. Granted, they help the Imperium all the time, but it's a massive region that isn't under the iron grip of the High Lords. That sort of thing is becoming more and more common, with worlds formerly directly controlled becoming more independent vassals. It's not the most dramatic point to showcase the Imperium's downfall, but it's a clear sign that it's losing influence. That's not to mention the outright degradation of every Imperial institution and more. The Administratum has no idea how many planets the Imperium owns. And that's planets. How the hell do you lose a planet? Shipments of supplies are completely wrong or never delivered to begin with, and entire regiments of the Guard or planets starve to death. Even if the equipment does arrive, half the time it doesn't work because the Imperium's tech is horribly misunderstood. The wider Imperium doesn't know how the hell any of it works. They leave it to the Mechanicus, who only half understand how things work. Sometimes this might not be horrible. I mean, even if a plasma gun explodes in a guy's hand, it still blew the other guy straight to hell, so mission accomplished. But some things that are failing are perhaps slightly more pressing issues, like their inability to recreate a massive amount of the machines of war they used to fight. Or the Golden Throne. There's a whole lot of ways that can go horribly wrong when it fails, and it will undoubtedly fail. I know one of the prevailing theories is that when it does finally fail and the Emperor truly dies, he'll ascend to become a true god. He's already a god, but I guess he'll become even godder. But there's also the possibility that he might just die. It probably won't happen, but he might just croak, and that's their lot. What's far more likely to happen is the Astronomicon failing, even if only for a time. That thing's light is the only thing that lets humanity's navy actually travel, and if it were to fail, they'd be up Shit's Creek without a paddle. It already doesn't reach the Imperium Nihilus through the Great Rift, and if that happened to the entire Imperium, there would very quickly be no more Imperium, because ships are just traveling blind through the warp and hoping they don't run headfirst into a black hole. Or a chaos god. Imagine accidentally rear-ending Khorne, because that's what piloting without the Astronomicon can lead to. To say nothing of the fact that even in the best case scenario where the Emperor comes back perfectly fine and is ready to lead the Imperium anew, that is absolutely breaking out into a religious civil war. Some dude shows up to some isolated world and claims to be the God Emperor that, as far as they know, is supposed to be stuck on his chair. Yeah, that's gonna shatter the Imperium immediately. There's already civil wars that break out between planets when they have different interpretations of the same faith. If someone said, yeah, I'm the Big E reborn, trust me, there's gonna be 500 different people claiming the same thing, all trying to get power. The Imperium is going to break. It may be soon, it may be a while coming with the return of people like Guilliman and the Lion, but its current situation is untenable. It just cannot keep going on as it does, and even demigods of logistics and warfare aren't enough to fix things. They can stem the external bleeding maybe, but the internal damage is just too severe. Really, I think it's just a matter of which sub-factions can keep going, because all of them can either go on independently for some amount of time, or might immediately go down with the Imperium. The Sisters of Battle, for instance, might have their faith allow them to survive an Imperium-less galaxy for some time. Alternatively, if the Imperium goes down in some really big way, they might all jump directly into the fire to die with their god. Same for Space Marines. The Ultramarines have a stable mini-empire in their Primarch, so they'd probably be kicking around for a while. Some others, like the Black Templars, might try and unga-bunga the 14th Black Crusade by themselves and consent to whatever hell Abaddon sent Sigismund to. The Guard would probably stick around for a while, because they're just soldiers. Very well-equipped soldiers by the standards of things like a planetary defense force, but they're just normal folk trained and armed to fight all the horrible things in the universe. It probably wouldn't be the Guard proper anymore once Imperial authority is gone, but there will always be some equivalent, even if it's just individual armies claiming to be the true remnant of the Guard. Special mention to the Mechanicus before we move on from the Imperium, because they're rather unique. In terms of just surviving, they're honestly a bit better off. They have the best tech all hoarded to themselves, which shoots the wider Imperium in the foot, but they don't care, and they have pretty much sole ownership of all the Forge Worlds in the galaxy. It's to the point that honestly, the Imperium can't survive without the Mechanicus, but the Mechanicus might be able to survive without the Imperium. But for winning, well, their win goal is a bit harder to define, because there's a whole lot of different ways they want to go about their goals. For instance, the most overarching main goal that one can probably say they all share is recovering lost technology. The Dark Age of technology had some real bangers, like that machine that eats data from the universe and breaks fundamental laws of matter, so that and other things are quite highly sought after by the Mechanicus. But the technology is horribly degraded by this point. Not even necessarily because it's been maliciously tampered with, stuff just breaks over time. So sometimes they find an STC that could in theory bring back the golden age of technology, but the data within it is so corrupted that it just can't be read. And of course, sometimes it has been maliciously tampered with, and when they finally figure out how to make a lasgun that's 10 times as powerful as the current ones, it explodes into a portal to hell. There's also a load of schisms within the Mechanicus. The biggest one was naturally during the Horus Heresy, when some tech priests decided chaos is actually dope as hell and demons make great batteries, which was seen as an affront to the Omnissiah by the ones who stayed loyal. And while it's really only the occasional tech priest that falls to chaos nowadays, it's a sign that winning for the Mechanicus isn't really possible because they have so many different ideas on just what winning is. AI might officially be reviled by the Mechanicus, but that doesn't stop people like Call from dicking around with it. Or the Necrons tech, which is nicely divided between people who think it's alien and therefore bad, or tech priests who cannot stop themselves from blowing a load when they think about getting their hands on biotransference technology. Speaking of Necrons, the Omnissiah might be a C'tan. There was a lore blurb where a tech priest learned what was in the Noctis Labyrinth and started desperately tearing his augmentations out in fear of what he had learned. So either it's a C'tan, the Void Dragon to be precise, or it's something equally horrifying. So yeah, the Mechanicus might be doomed when an ancient star god of technology fully reawakens and dismantles them because he's the god of that kind of stuff and he can just do that if he wants. Sleep soundly, Mechanicus fans, because you have the only religion in 40k that might just be objectively false. They also have the most to lose, and losing something is far worse for them. The wider Imperium forgets how to make a certain type of gear, and it's like, well, that sucks, oh well. The Mechanicus forgets how to make that same gear, and it's a catastrophic blow to their production, because that gear is used in 500 other things they're in charge of making, and now they can't produce any of them. Scale that up to potentially losing something that is used to maintain the tech priests themselves, and ooh boy, does the Mechanicus have the potential to fall harder than the Imperium itself. Also, sometimes when a tech priest dares to invent new things, the flash of inspiration they got was actually a demon telling them how to make a pipe bomb that goes off on completion. Now I've held myself off for long enough, so it's time to talk about elves. Unfortunately, I have to talk about them dying, but I will do my best to put aside my favoritism. So let's do a lightning round of all the problems the Eldar just have to deal with inherent to their species. Almost all of their race vanished when they birthed Slaanesh, so they instantly have none of the infrastructure that even the smallest other factions have. The moment they're born, She Who Thirsts has an inherent pull on their souls, and when they die, if no protections are taken or able to be used, it's instant damnation. Do not pass go, do not collect $200, go directly to Slaanesh's gut. Further proof that the glorious Asur of Warhammer Fantasy are simply built different to even their 40k counterparts, but that's neither here nor there. And they're outnumbered by everyone, probably even the Tau. So in a galaxy where everyone wants to kill everyone else, they're completely outnumbered by people who would gladly see them all finally die out. In the Farseer novel, they outright compare themselves to humanity by saying that the Eldar are fighting against a race that is as numberless as the grains of sand on a beach. But that's just the Eldar race as a whole. Let's get into the specifics of why each individual subsect of Eldar can't win, why their doom will almost certainly come in spite of their best efforts. Craftworlders first. The Craftworlds are the ones who have all the impetus on them. The Exodites just want to chill out and do nothing, and the Dark Eldar are quite happy with how the galaxy is at the moment. The Craftworlds, meanwhile, are constantly in a desperate race to keep their species alive for just a few more minutes. They read prophecies in fate itself, and a lot of the time fate is telling them that if they don't go fight this battle right now, they're going to get wiped a couple hundred years down the line. So they're constantly losing soldiers in wars they can barely afford, because the alternative is a war later down the line they can afford even less. They have plenty of magic super weapons to their name to match the Imperium's, but they don't use them because they genuinely cannot trust themselves not to slip back into old habits if they turn them on. You might think it's stupid, and to some extent it is, because using one of their old psychic devices that turns a planet inside out butthole first is a great way to deal with an Ork invasion. But that's just the first step on the path to excess as far as they're concerned. They can't even use their full psychic might, because if they do, Slaanesh is waiting for them. These are not the elves of fantasy and Age of Sigmar. Teclis can cast Power Word Kill all day until his magic tuberculosis puts him to bed for the night. Some random Farseer trying to do the same is gonna get vored. Said Farseer also can't always rely on their psychic predictions, because people can intentionally or unintentionally dick with fate and make the visions unreliable. They do have the unparalleled advantage of having almost sole control of the webway, but that's also a double-edged sword. The webway is breaking down as time goes on, and especially with the Great Rift, whole swaths of it have become completely unusable. Also, because it's such a great advantage, people really like trying to break into it, like the Necrons, who were taught by the C'tan how to brute force their way in. To keep this from getting too far into the specifics, and to end this segment quickly because talking about how the Eldar are doomed hurts my soul, the best case for the Craftworld Eldar might damn well be lighting up their super weapons and going down in a blaze of glory. Slaanesh and the Necrons may be damn tough to deal with, but the Eldar Unchained can show them why they survived the War of Heaven, even though it'll kill them to do so. Or they're gonna slowly die out in constant battles of attrition over millennia. Either way, the future is not gonna be kind to the Eldar. Harlequins now, and overall they're very similar to the Craftworlds, especially with how they're the most outnumbered Eldar faction by far. This is somewhat mitigated by the fact that they can clown on the Custodians when they feel the need, and have the sole remaining active and whole Eldar god on their side, Kegarak. He's a big clown so powerful he can put a whoopee cushion under anyone's seat across the galaxy. Terrifying stuff. They've even got access to the Black Library, the home of everything you could possibly want to know about everything in the galaxy, especially chaos. They know damn near everything. Of course, from their first specific portent of doom, aside from being Eldar and therefore hunted by Slaanesh, they also have to deal with Tzeentch, who would love to get his hands on the Black Library. In particular, they constantly deal with Ahriman of the Thousand Suns, whose life mission may in theory be things like reversing his rubric, but it really just seems like he wants to piss on the Harlequins' front lawn and steal all their stuff. They keep thwarting him, and the latest attempt involved Yvraine really hitting him with some emotional damage when she turned rubric marines back into flesh and blood before shunting them into the warp, but he has all the time in the world to get into the Black Library, so he's gonna keep making the attempt. And the thing about the Harlequins is that they only need to decisively lose once to lose as a faction. Entire Craftworlds can and have been destroyed, and while yeah, that's catastrophic for the Eldar, it doesn't necessarily harm a different Craftworld with that one's destruction. But the Harlequins only really have the Black Library as a home base. Between that and the fact it's such a mountain of powerful lore to have hold of, the wrong people beating them once would likely be enough to spell their doom. That's far easier said than done, because to reiterate, they have a god who lives in their house that would happily beat the snot out of any would-be home invaders. But if this defeat did happen, then the Harlequins are screwed. Even if they turn the Black Library into a fortress to rival Cadia and become the last bastion of the Eldar, it'd be them against everyone else trying to break in for the rest of time. And demons being almost unkillable means that's a war of attrition they can't win. Now the Exodites. Why am I doing this segment? They're the Exodites. Their defenses involve wild animals and hoping a Craftworld is nearby to help them out. The Exodites are screwed. The Eldar version of Mountain Men die in droves whenever the writer needs to motivate the Craftworlders. No shit, these guys are doomed. You will never get your Wood Elves in space no matter how hard you beg Daddy Games Workshop. It's just not gonna happen. But what about the Ynnari? They're so fucked. Half the Eldar consider them to be heretics, Vect wants Yvraine's still living head mounted on his mantle, and the original endgame for them was every single Eldar ever dying to form Iniad. Then the Deathwatch cocked Eldred's ritual up, thank you Captain Artemis, I hope you contract super Nurgle crotch rot, and now the Eldar god that was supposed to save their race is barely even awake and only half formed. From a meta perspective, GW has just completely abandoned that plotline, and they kept dying in droves in their own books before the trilogy trilogy was canned anyways. Their current goal involves grabbing all of the Crone Swords to empower Ynnari, one of which is currently dangling between Slaanesh's legs as she taunts them with it. So the key to the Eldar's salvation from Slaanesh is being held by Slaanesh. Wonderful stuff, Games Workshop. Thank you for revitalizing the Eldar plotlines and giving them a way out of their destruction, only to take the Ynnari behind the shed and blow their head off before they could get anywhere. The single thing I can say that they might have going for them is that in Age of Sigmar, Slaanesh got beat up and put in jail by those elf gods. The only thing the Ynnari have going for them is that far more competent gods written by people that don't hate elves found a way to handle Slaanesh. Also, Slaanesh is still active even though she's imprisoned and is actively breaking out over an Age of Sigmar. So even if they did manage that in 40k, the Ynnari would probably all just spontaneously explode for their trouble. To round off the spells, the Drukhari. For the time being, they're not looking too bad. Khamira is safe, for a given meaning of the word. Anyone trying to invade is going to find out the hard way that it's the single greatest concentration of Eldar in the galaxy, and if anything, they're happy you came to them because their meal is being delivered free of charge. Sidetrack, Jagat Khan is absolutely nailed to a wall somewhere unimportant because they found it funny. Bite me, White Scars fans. And they even have technology to bring people back from the dead, which is insane. Oh, you were devoured by Slaanesh because you're an Eldar? What if that just didn't happen? Sure, the homunculus doing the operation might turn you into a couch as payment for his trouble, but hey, maybe he won't. Their issues come from long-term problems, because the Dark Eldar society is not what one could call sustainable. Everything they do is built around causing suffering to stave off Slaanesh and top up their own souls as she slowly drains them away. The problem is that eventually they're gonna run out of people to feed off of. Let's give them the most ideal scenario possible and say that the galaxy continues on exactly as it is until the heat death of reality. I know I said I would try and avoid that, but this time I swear it's for the sake of the exercise. The last mortal things to survive are the Dark Eldar and Khamira. Everyone else killed each other, and it's just them left. Last man standing. Well, lucky for you, Dark Eldar, because now Chaos and Slaanesh in particular have exactly one thing left to feed on. And the last event ever before Eternal lights out is going to be an endless tide of demons breaching into Khamira for one final snack. For more immediate problems, Dark Eldar society is not what one would call stable. At the best times, it resembles the worst barroom brawl you could imagine. Massive power shakeups are not really good for what stability they do have, and Vec dying and then coming back was exactly the sort of thing that isn't ideal for the Dark Eldar as a whole. Even if he did resurrect and kill a whole bunch of his enemies, he lost a whole ton of credibility doing it. His position is less stable than ever, especially between the Ynnari making him look stupid and demons breaching into Khamira before the Mandrakes stop them. And in Khamira, all it takes is one Archon either deciding he's got the guts to take it all, or he's got nothing left to lose, and breaking out the Black Hole Cannon to bring the whole damn thing down. There's also the fact that any fight they get into is not a fair one. When the Dark Eldar are used on the tabletop, narratively, it's either an ambush against a force cobbled together to fight them, or something has gone horribly, horribly wrong for them. They hate fair fights, because it means there's a chance they can either die, or just not get as profitable a harvest as they'd like. So if anyone can successfully ambush them in a decisive enough way, which is admittedly very difficult, it would be a wonderful way to put them down. And much like the Harlequins, it only really takes one horrible enough loss to put them down for good. It'd need to be a far bigger catastrophe than the Harlequins, sure, because Khamira is the largest single city ever that takes up God only knows how many solar systems worth of space within the webway. But one breach big enough, be it demons, Tyranids, or Orks, or even enough Imperial soldiers, is all it takes to send them spiraling into hell. Or to be more realistic with what's probably going to happen, when GW decides that Jagat Khan had actually spent 10,000 years dismantling their entire command structure all by himself. He's a Primarch, he insta-wins everything. Yeah, okay buddy, into the black hole box you go. Vex orders for spewing Primarch propaganda. Moving on to the other races, Tyranids. It's a very simple case for them really, because I imagine they have the potential to stave off any sort of defeat the longest, or they're imminently screwed. In the worst case scenario, the Tyranids in the Milky Way galaxy need to eat soon, or they're gonna starve. Hive fleets have been seen starving if they can't get enough food in time, so it's possible that at least for the ones in the Milky Way, they need their calories to start coming in quick. My personal theory is that their hibernation between galaxies is incredibly efficient, but in order to leave hibernation, it needs a lot of energy for them to wake up properly. This might be a bit of a long shot, but I'd say there's a decent chance that the Tyranids can be starved out if the defenses against the ones that are here now can hold just long enough. Sure, some of them would probably stick around forever, but that'd turn them from a galaxy-ending threat into dealing with a rogue hive fleet every now and again. That very idea was Kryptman's reason for blowing up entire Imperial planets for no other reason than they were in the way of the Tyranids. While he was exiled from the Inquisition for this because it was such a colossal loss of life it rivaled the Horus Heresy, it's very telling they didn't kick him out because they thought he was wrong about the matter. The best case scenario for them is much the same, truth be told, just longer term. Let's say they eat everyone. The Swarm Lord is made using minerals from another galaxy, so at the very least they've done it once, no reason they can't do it again. This continues on until nearly the end of time. Eventually, the fridge that is the universe isn't going to have any more food in it. When you go all in on being the ultimate predator, you've only got so long before you run out of prey. So the Tyranids' ultimate condition for being doomed is either someone stops them long enough for the hunger pangs to become critical, or they win until the end of time and suddenly there's nothing left to eat. As for their Gene Stealer cult minions, well, that's an easy one to explain why they're doomed. If they win, the Tyranids come and eat them. If they lose, the Imperium kills them all for their failed uprising attempt and General Xeno's shenaniganery. I know this isn't a do or don't, but if you'd like a bit of a spoiler for the Gene Stealer cults one, don't play this army if you want a happy ending for your forces to be even remotely possible. By design, you aren't gonna get it. This includes a happy ending for your bank account, by the way. This army is expensive. But what about the factions that don't need to eat, breathe, or honestly do anything besides sit there looking pretty and watch all these silly primitives kill each other? How are the Necrons doomed? Well, I admit that I might have to stretch the term doomed a bit for the Necrons. If 40k has a technological ceiling, they're either at it or damn close to it. There's trillions of them, they throw their gods at their enemies like Pokemon, and they're unbelievably powerful. They nearly closed the Eye of Terror with just the pylons on Cadia after Abaddon wrecked the rest of them. You leave them alone for long enough, and they could probably build more of them once all the remaining sleeping cryptechs wake up. That being said, their issues rapidly begin popping up as you look for them, many of which are potentially unsolvable. Every Necron destroyed is one permanently gone. Even the Eldar can in theory replenish their numbers, though it may take centuries of peace they likely won't get. While actually destroying a Necron is quite difficult, since reanimation protocols can repair them mid-fight, and even then they can also just teleport home for repairs. If you actually get one, that's it. One less Necron forever. And most of those Necrons that are left are unthinking, unfeeling beings that only barely have any semblance of who they once were. The ones who do retain their personalities are so prone to infighting they make the Horus Heresy look downright civil. They had a ruling body whose only purpose was to keep the lords who awoke early from killing the rest of their peers in their sleep. The favorite pastime of the Necrons is a civil war. It's by no means unreasonable to assume that they might take themselves out with their constant infighting, or at least weaken themselves to the point others can finish the job. And that's only some of the problems they have internally, let alone everyone else. Chaos wavers between being a literal insect compared to them and the ultimate problem they face. Either way, for those of them that want their souls back, it's a problem because no one wants to get the soul juice that's been hanging around in Nurgle's garden. The Eldar are still around, and the Necrons are one of the few factions they consider breaking out those forbidden super weapons for, so the War in Heaven Round 2 is looking like it'll rip the galaxy a new one once again. The Orks are also still here, and while certainly not as impressive as the Krork they once were, are still a pain in the ass to deal with. One of their scientists, Illuminor Caesares, has been trying to find a way to let the Necrons ascend beyond their metal bodies into true godhood, and he has yet to figure out how. On his most oppressive days, he wonders if it's because lacking a soul has prevented that final step from taking place. And to be fair, he may be right. The Necrons that retain personalities are acutely aware of what they've lost. They have no soul, they have no creativity. They can't make or appreciate things like music anymore beyond whatever value you can scrounge up for it just existing. They can appreciate a song being well made on a mechanical level, or a movie having good production quality, but they can't really enjoy it, not like we can. That's why they're so driven to find hobbies and figure out what to do, to distract themselves and find some sort of purpose. When you live forever, you need something to keep you going, and that's doubly so when a deal made millions of years ago robbed you of your very being. They're on a time limit in all sorts of ways. The other races of the galaxy only grow more numerous compared to them as time goes on, unless the Necrons do something extremely big. They could balance the scales if they did something like erasing Ultramar, but otherwise there's only becoming less Necrons compared to the masses of humanity, the Orks, and Tyranids. Speaking of, the Tyranids might eat everyone before biotransference can be reversed, or chaos may corrupt everyone. It's hard to either rule over the living or take their bodies for your own own purposes if there's nothing left to take. They do have time travel, but it clearly has some sort of limitations, because otherwise Orkan could just go back to the war in heaven and stop it from happening. Or further back than that, and they could murder the old ones when they were in their species' youth. And of course, plenty of Necrons woke up wrong if they woke up at all. Solar flares destroying tomb worlds before they woke up, younger races looting them and security systems failing, or just time. Even for them, 65 million years is a long while. Plenty of them woke up even lesser than they were from just losing their souls. Between biotransference robbing them of their very selves and the ravages of time, the doom of the Necrons might not be them being wiped out or destroyed, but the last vestiges of their sanity fading away with the stars themselves. Stuff like Trajan's Vault of Everything Ever might be the last remaining things to show the Necrons were ever more than just statues, or more than just insane robots if the Flare virus spreads. Or to go further on that, maybe the Necrons will just lock themselves in a time loop like what Trajan did in that one short, forever looping their glory moments as the universe passes on and dies around them. Perhaps it's not the most satisfying doom, but it's a fittingly depressing end for a tale as tragic as the Necrons. Or the C'tan reforge themselves and enslave the Necrons again. Always a possibility. Although them all going insane due to being alive for so long is kinda funny to me. I bet Trajan would be the last one to go nuts since he's all about history and preserving events, so out of sheer stubbornness he'd hang around to chronicle their last days. Maybe the final days of the Necrons would be a now crazed Orkan, time traveling in and out of Trajan's museum, constantly singing "Let's do the time warp again for all eternity." An endless loop of the Rocky Horror Picture Show is the true final fate for what was once the Necron tier. Speaking of the war in heaven though, the Orks. And they're, much like the Dark Eldar, one of the only ones you can say are actively winning as they are right now. They just want to fight, and 40k provides conflict aplenty. And as I've said before, an Ork is always winning in a fight. He either wins, so he won, he ran away, so he can always try again, which is still winning, or he died, but he died fighting, which is fun, so that also counts as a win. Their gods can beat the hell out of the Chaos gods, and the only reason they don't is because Gork and Mork prefer to fight each other most of the time. And while this probably won't happen, Tuska Demonkiller could eventually leave Khorne's realm. And when that happens, the galaxy is going to learn what happens when you lock a race of beings that get stronger with every fight in a non-stop battle royale for what may as well be millions of years given warp time distortion crap. Goodbye everyone else, because Tuska is now a Krork, and he's gonna make it everyone's problem. And if you'll excuse me once again bringing up Age of Sigmar in this 40k video, Gordrak, the closest thing to a faction leader the Auric war clans have, has said that neither death, chaos, or order really get what life is about. He doesn't want to spend all this time civilization building because it's boring, why bother? But he also doesn't want to burn everything down to the last atom like chaos, because then there's no fighting left to be had. A stalemate is the best possible scenario for the Orks, and they have one right now, because it means eternal fighting against fun opponents. Are the Orks just Saiyans? So to try to give the Orks some kind of grand doom, winning as a whole and wiping everyone else out would arguably be losing for them. There's no one left to fight but each other, and while they're happy doing that, it just isn't the same. Of course, getting to that point is a challenge even for the meanest and greenest of boys. The other races of the galaxy have plenty of methods of permanently defeating them and cleansing a planet of their spores. Most often fire, but Votann is pioneering the field of Orkish war crimes with that monofilament wire weapon that's covered in flesh-eating bacteria. That gets the job done real good. And if you could somehow keep the Orks from getting into a good scrap, they physically waste away like you've deprived them of food. So, even with all the other races that have some claim to being eternal, the Orks are probably the hardest to figure out how they truly lose. You could wipe them out, sure, but they're just happy to fight, and no matter how they go, it's gonna be one hell of a fight. The Leagues of Votann I am giving their own section, technically, but honestly the reasons for inevitable death and decay are the same as the Imperium's. Put simply, it'll either be a slow and steady downfall, or an even more rapid decline than the Imperium. The Votann ancestor cores are so integral to their society that if/when they finally all break, it might be an immediate downslide into anarchy and technological regression. They've got farther to fall, so the fall might just hurt them that much more. On the flip side, the squats in Necromunda show that they don't just explode when they don't have a Votann to turn to, so maybe it would be a slower death. And for the most part, they aren't stupid, either by Imperial standards of spending 1 trillion lives to save a worthless planet, or by Warhammer Fantasy Dwarf standards and digging themselves into a hole to the center of the Earth Earth because the Grudge Book demands they do so. They're also a bit harder to figure out because beyond being rather broadly similar to the Imperium's downfall conditions, they have almost no lore. I can't tell you the specifics of how Squat Society will doom them because we know almost nothing about Squat Society. Maybe they will go a bit too all in on a grudge and get a whole bunch of themselves killed for it, or really piss off a powerful faction in their efforts to acquire more resources. Like they harvest a planet full of resources that Imhotep controls, and then the entire Sautek dynasty decides it's going to kill anyone who's under 5 feet tall. That'd probably do it. Of course, to cheat again and go back to the meta, the greatest danger the leagues of Votann face is getting Ynnari'd and GW forgetting they exist. Just one book, GW. We're starving over here. A man can only subsist off of Deep Rock Galactic references for so long. I don't know how many more rock and stones I got in me, man. Now the Tau. Oh, the Tau. For all I've said about them holding their own just fine given their small size, it is genuinely the biggest reason they're doomed. I don't think any one single faction could really do them in, at least as it stands now. Another faction will always stop the one trying to wipe them out from fully doing it, like when the Damocles Gulf Crusade was stopping because the Tyranids were invading. And one of the sub-factions I just don't think is enough, like the Death Guard invading the Empire alone. I don't think Nurgle's bloated, smelly legion is enough to do more than give a bunch of bemused Firecast members target practice as they slowly waddle into railgun range. But eventually, that's not going to be the case. Eventually, some other faction will win enough that they can focus on the Tau, and then it's game over. Or if a Black Crusade was launched specifically at the Tau, or an entire major hive fleet, or Ork, or Imperial Crusade, or what have you, it's game over if that happens. They're so incredibly outnumbered, potentially even by some of the Eldar factions, that it goes past being funny, past being pitiful, and then loops back around to being kinda funny again. In a 1v1, them versus the Imperium is like David versus Goliath, but David is blind, deaf, and had his arms and legs cut off. In fact, just to save time, let me tell you the single possible way I can think of the Tau winning and spreading the greater good galaxy-wide. Everyone else kills each other, and the Tau quietly annex enough worlds to be able to stand up to what's left. If the Imperium finally does crack and the Tau can pick up enough of the pieces, that'd probably be the best and most likely way to do it. Honestly, the only way I can see them winning is if everyone else ignores them long enough that the Tau can just quietly build power uninterrupted for millennia. Otherwise, they don't have a chance in hell. Being generous, they can go down in a blaze of glory and cripple one of the bigger factions. Being perhaps more realistic, they're going to get the treatment all the human factions without tabletop armies got during the end times. You know, a single paragraph of lore that amounts to, and then the Skaven killed and ate all of them, the end. That'd be funny if GW did exactly that, though. Brought the Skaven in solely to get rid of the Tau. I like the Tau, and I wouldn't even be mad at that. I'd just shrug and go, so that's what Ikit has spent his time doing in AOS. Just to mention it, they also aren't immune to chaos, so that's a big problem. The latest Fear expansion had pretty much everyone on the expedition go at least a little bit insane from warp exposure, and honestly, their resistance to chaos in some ways hurts them. Being harder to possess by demons is nice, but when it comes to fighting, being able to cast Fireball is a lot more useful. And finally, we come to Chaos. Oh, Chaos. The End Times and Age of Sigmar has made talking about Chaos being doomed such a complicated affair. Because for those of you who aren't too familiar, Chaos works more or less the same between all the settings. And it turns out, at least over in Fantasyland, Chaos has destroyed all of Fantasy before, and the cycle just repeats each time. The survivors of the destroyed world become the gods of the new one, they build up civilization, Chaos eventually creeps in, and then another End Times is all but inevitable. And even ignoring that, a stalemate of eternal war and suffering is exactly what the Chaos gods want. All those negative emotions of war, sickness, conspiracy, and excess are just delightful to them, so quite frankly, they don't need to win in order to win. Much like the Orks and Dark Eldar, only with more supernatural stuff involved. And even beyond all that, there are followers of Nurgle who believe that life can and should be completely wiped out in order for it to blossom anew, and so Chaos can have that new generation of life. So even if you drag the Halo rings into 40k and fire them off, it might not do anything in terms of truly beating Chaos. But by God, I will find a way to have Chaos defeated. The End Times weren't inevitable in Fantasy, and by the Emperor, they aren't here either. So let's set some ground rules for how I imagine this could work. How Chaos can be said to be ultimately doomed in spite of everything they have going for them. Much of what we know about Chaos comes from the mouth of Chaos worshippers, who are not exactly unbiased. Like Tzeentch. How do we know he sees all and fate itself is at his whim? Oh, because a Lord of Change said it's true. I don't see a problem with that. Surely a demon of the god of trickery wouldn't lie to me. That'd be insane. So claims of them being all-powerful and eternal should be taken with a grain of salt. Additionally, in 40k, they all have specific points where before there wasn't a chaos god, and then after that point, there was a chaos god. Slaanesh, to my knowledge, is the only one we have a somewhat precise date for, around M30, so we know for a fact that the universe can exist just fine without them. Yes, when one exists, it means they have always existed, but you know what? Nah, these bastards can absolutely be killed. That was the Ynnari's whole purpose. And the positive traits they're known for still existed before they popped into being. It's not like they're required for people to be happy, or sad, or hopeful, or warlike. So reality isn't going to implode without them existing, and numerous people within the setting think they can be killed. So why is Chaos utterly doomed? Well, how about we look first at the Traitor Marines, because I need a starting point. The Traitor Marines are more generically doomed in the grand scheme of things compared to Chaos itself. Constantly fighting, replenishing their numbers can be harder than even the Eldar. Their stuff's even more broken than the Imperiums, because at least Astartes and the wider Imperium either have some level of maintenance ability, or they can bother the Mechanicus and they finally cave in and help them. Traitor Marines, meanwhile, can at best steal stuff from the Imperium to fix what they have or replace it. Usually, they can barely maintain it if all and just have to deal with the constant degradation, unless they're the Iron Warriors, and at worst, they have to deal with the Dark Mechanicum. I will count that as worse than no maintenance, because the Dark Mechanicus will almost certainly shove a demon into their armor as a prank without their knowledge when they're fixing it. This is to say nothing of the fact that the Dark Gods will almost certainly get them all killed sooner or later. For every traitor that becomes a Demon Prince, another 100 are turned into Chaos Spawn. Between attrition from combat and their own gods digging them over for a giggle, Chaos Space Marines have a limited shelf life. Their goals are also all over the place. You could argue that certain subgroups like the Emperor's Children are winning, because all they want to do is feel good. They can probably stave off their inevitable extinction for quite a while as long as they keep to themselves. But then you look at the World Eaters, who are going to die out sooner rather than later, because all they live for is war. And as surprising as it may be to learn, people die in active combat, or whenever Karn decides his legion isn't doing enough war. Sure, you can argue that since they're Khorne servants, they only live for war and they're winning up until the moment they die out, but once they die, they're no longer able to serve chaos. Also, I already gave the Orks that victory point for winning even if they lose, and I'm not repeating the point. I wrote the video, I can be a hypocrite when it comes to a faction I hate. Then you get to the Black Legion, who wants to take on the entire Imperium, and the overall fact that whenever chaos shows up, everyone wants them very, very dead. The thing I'll say is the closest to an overall win goal for the Traitor Marines, taking down the Imperium, is far easier said than done. Because as much as I do think the Imperium is doomed and talked about it plenty earlier, it's not exactly a small task. It's a galaxy-wide empire. It may be a dying one, but that just means any given Chaos Marine can get crushed by its death throes. But what about Chaos itself, the primordial annihilator, the ultimate threat to all those who have souls? Well, the simplest is the Necrons. Perhaps not doomed, since emotions and whatnot would probably still echo in the warp, but it would just be them screaming into the warp for all time, unable to do anything. I count that as losing pretty hard. There's also a whole multitude of potential ways Chaos can be taken down. The Eldar are fervently preparing for the end times when they face off against Chaos at the end of their time, with Iniad specifically existing for Slaanesh, and Kegarax seemingly ready to just start swinging at whoever gets close enough to him. I haven't a damn clue what exactly is in that crystal book of his, but it's probably going to be brutal. And the Tyranids eating everyone would be a phenomenal way of getting rid of chaos. Sure, Nurgle may be about the cycle of life and death, but if the Tyranids eat everyone, then there won't be anything left to start the cycle again. That's not even getting to issues that chaos has inherent to their ability to win. Whether or not you worship them or consider them to be parasites, they require some level of living followers. In fantasy, yeah, they blew the world up, but they immediately went to go find new ones to leech off of. The Emperor genuinely felt he could shut them out completely, and out of all the shit I give him, I won't doubt him on this one. At least in the sense of it being possible. I highly doubt the capability of the Golden Dickhead to do so. Eventually, everyone in the universe will die, and they'll be forced to either scrounge for another reality to subsist off of, or die out themselves. And even beyond that, none of them can ever truly win. Tzeentch is the most obvious one, since if he were to win, he'd have no one to scheme against, and he'd stagnate and die. But the other Chaos Gods aren't much better. Khorne needs war. If he wins and kills everyone ever, no one's left to give him the war he desires. Nurgle can be defeated by the grand and overwhelming power of hand sanitizer, and as far as we know, the only evidence of him truly being a god of life and rebirth is the fact that some of his followers say he is. Age of Sigmar and the Mortal Realms, the only currently existing universe we know for a fact came about from the remains of the last one, was brought into being without any involvement from Nurgle. And Slaanesh is a god that requires a whole lot of things to properly exist. People need to want for more. There needs to be sentient life for her to corrupt, because I really don't think an animal can become degenerate enough to do the things Slaanesh requires to feed off of. These gods all have their fundamental needs and desires that need to be fulfilled by mortals to exist. If they were to ever stop getting those requirements, they're cooked. And if you don't mind a little bit of self-promotion, I made a whole video on ways I think you could permanently beat Chaos. It can be done. Their victory is by no means inevitable. Don't forget the Chaos gods are formed from the beliefs and emotions of mortals as well. Let's say that it's equally true in 40k as it is in fantasy that the Chaos gods just move to another universe once the current one is done for. Who's to say the next one they inhabit won't just be a paradise they can't possibly get a foothold in, or that the gods of that one aren't strong enough to take them on? And you know what? Why do we even need to go that far? Chaos, as far as we know, is a Milky Way problem. The universe has billions of galaxies in it, and that's just what we can observe. Even if they completely kill and corrupt everyone in our galaxy, what next? Can they even move through the warp in the space between galaxies? I don't think so. And again, any claims to them being truly universal boil down to a demon or follower of Chaos said they were. I can say to you, I have a 3-foot cock. That doesn't mean it's true. In fact, we know they aren't universal, because if they truly were, the Tyranids sure as hell wouldn't exist. And perhaps ultimately, because Chaos requires mortal races, that means that as long as there are mortals to corrupt, there are mortals to stand against Chaos. For every champion they turn, there's one that the forces of order can turn back. For every god they've slain, there's an example like the Emperor burning down Nurgle's garden. Chaos can never win so long as a single being is willing to stand up to them, which is actually quite a happy thought I didn't think I'd have in this video. I'll be the first to admit that out of all these factions, Chaos is probably the hardest to say they can definitively lose, even more so than the Orks. As long as mortal races exist, so will Chaos in some form. But on that same token, there's no way they can ever truly win. The great game they play in the warp can never come to an end, because if it does, then so too do they. Any lies of them being all-powerful and all-existing are simply that. Lies to hide the fact they have limits that they can well and truly lose. It's fun to talk about how one faction could or likely will win. Everyone wants to imagine someone being a winner. But 40k is so miserable, the idea of everyone being doomed to defeat is just as interesting a topic. Victory is something just as likely to be impossible to achieve as it is for one faction to pull it off, because in 40k, true hope is in short supply. Would you honestly walk up to someone working in a Forge world and tell them their life has a chance of getting better? Because I know for damn sure I wouldn't. I'd get executed on the spot by the Inquisition for spreading that sort of talk, but that doesn't make it any less true. There's the depression. I was wondering where it was after that last bit about Chaos. And don't forget to download Warthunder today, free for PC, console, and mobile, where new players and those who haven't logged in 6 months can get the exclusive bonus pack, including premium vehicles, an exclusive vehicle decorator Eagle of Valor, 100,000 Silver Lions, and 7 days worth of premium account. Bonus pack only available for a limited time and only available for PC and consoles. Thank you as always to my wonderful channel members. You are the constant brutal warfare to my 40k, keeping me going in spite of it all. A special thank you to JoCat, both for the idea and all the help he's done with the video itself. Yet another person from outside the Warhammer space I've tricked into thinking I know what I'm talking about. Not quite sure how that keeps happening, but I'm happy it does. And if you'd like to support this channel, feel free to subscribe or become a member. Either way, thank you for watching and take care out there. I'm gonna do the thing. I want to do the thing. Is that too much? Is it too much? Just get rid of it if it is. No one needs to know about this audio. If this is still here and animated, I'm gonna look like a goddamn clown.